There are a lot of things right now that President Trump is spearheading and leading. And the question across a lot of different states and in our country is, how do people approve of how the president is performing right now? There was a new survey out of Catawba College with Catawba and YouGov that is looking into just that when it comes to how North Carolinians are feeling. And joining us this morning, we have Dr. Michael Bitzer, professor of politics and history at Catawba College and director for North Carolina politics and public service. As always, it's great to have you with us, sir.
Good to be with you.
So let's get into this survey, which also looks into the big Senate race there in North Carolina. We'll get to that in just a bit, but let's start with the president. Obviously, the big thing happening right now is the war with Iran. How are North Carolinians approving or disapproving of, first, the president's performance and specifically what we're doing with Iran?
Yes, so we've been asking over the past year, since last March, an approval-disapproval rating of the president. And in this month's Catawba YouGov poll, right now the president is at his largest deficit in terms of approval and disapproval. He is sitting at 42% approval and 55% disapproval. And this is the largest gap that we have recorded. It's well outside the margin of error. So we can pretty much attest to North Carolinians have indeed turned against the president. This is trending nationally as well. Although I would say here in North Carolina, he has a slightly higher approval rating than what his national numbers are experiencing. But this is indeed a true test of where North Carolinians think about the president, and they have moved against him. This is typical in a presidential midterm year to see the president's approval ratings basically go underwater. But I think the issue related to Iran has certainly played into this factor as well. We're seeing that North Carolinians are very much against the president when it comes to the issue of military operations against Iran. We asked the question, do you agree or disagree that the U.S. was right to intervene militarily in Iran? 44% of North Carolinians disagreed with that. Only a third agreed. And so that kind of dynamic, I think, is playing into this issue with the president's approval and, more significantly, disapproval ratings.
You mentioned that historically we do see approval ratings dip when we get closer to the midterms. I've always just attributed to that too. It's easier to blame the person who's currently in office for things that are going awry than it would be for a candidate who's trying to come in. That's been my longstanding kind of thought process on that. But for you, you've been doing this for a long time. Even though that has been historically the case, are you seeing anything different from this drop in approval ratings than maybe past administrations, even the president's past term when it came to the midterms?
Yeah, I think that this is a classic kind of dynamic in midterm elections. We have seen over the past 50 years only two midterms where presidents actually picked up seats in Congress. The general rule of thumb is that in midterms, voters basically have buyer's regret of whoever the president is, and they tend to move against the president and the president's party. We certainly saw that when President Trump was in his first term in 2018. Democrats did well in that context. So this is kind of fitting the historic norms. Now, Republicans are trying to combat that and try and insulate themselves. But I think over the next 6 months, it is going to be very difficult if the Iran situation continues. And more importantly, economics tends to play a major factor in the calculus of what voters are thinking about when they go to the polls in a midterm election year. And if gas prices continue to go up, if that spreads throughout the economy and prices overall continue to move up, it is going to make a very tough political environment for Republicans and Republican candidates.
And we know that North Carolina, with its big military presence there, is directly now tied to this war in Iran. And even here in Virginia, we just saw in the last 24 hours another aircraft carrier that's going out into the Middle East, and we already have another based aircraft carrier there. So both communities very impacted when it comes to the military. A lot of families have invested interest, and I'm sure reading through some of the information that you all put out within the survey, that played a huge factor in this. But let's talk about the other big thing that's coming out of this Senate race, right? You got some major players that are going to be on the stage now that fight is set. You have obviously former Governor Roy Cooper on the Democratic side, and then you have Republican Michael Whatley on the GOP side of this. What did your survey see in terms of maybe early indications of where that race could be going?
Well, certainly this is an early indication. We are, 7 months out from November, but the time is ticking. And what we found among likely and leaning voters for November's general election is that Roy Cooper is garnering about 48% of the vote, Michael Whatley 34%, with about 14% undecided. And I think that there's a number of aspects we need to take into consideration. One, I don't see this being a major blowout come November. I think for North Carolina, we have a long history of being a competitive battleground state. This race will certainly tighten up, particularly as Republicans come back home to their party loyalty and to support Whatley. But this race is very much a critical race for Democrats to win, because if they have any expectation of trying to regain control of the Senate, they need Roy Cooper to be the next U.S. Senator from North Carolina. He is certainly garnering a lot of Democratic support. That's not surprising. But where the real contest, I think, will be fought out is among independents. And right now, he has a 48-27 advantage over Whatley. We haven't seen a whole lot of advertising. I have to caution folks in North Carolina, just wait. The onslaught will continue. Will start here very soon to fight the general campaign. But a lot of this early work, I think, is going to have to be about framing the candidates. And in particular, Michael Whatley has a very high don't know percentage behind his numbers. That opens up an opportunity for Whatley to define himself, but it also opens up an opportunity for Democrats and the Cooper campaign to frame Whatley in perhaps a negative light. So we'll have to watch and see how the dynamics of advertising plays out over the next several months into the summertime before the real heart of the campaign starts in the fall.
And correct me if I'm wrong, I went to college in North Carolina, Elon University. It's been about a decade since the last Democratic U.S. Senator out of North Carolina, correct? And since then, it's been Republicans for both of the senators out of the state.
Correct. 2008 with Kay Hagan winning when Barack Obama narrowly won North Carolina. She had a higher margin of victory over Elizabeth Dole, the sitting Republican incumbent. But since then, it has been Republicans controlling the federal races, President and U.S. Senate, with Ted Budd and Tom Tillis being our U.S. senators. This is an open seat election, and that oftentimes creates the most competitive kind of environment that we'll see in a midterm election.
And following up on that, two names I want to ask you their potential impact and what they do could have on this race. First, the president. You just talked about what those approval ratings say. How much does how North Carolinians feel about him play into that U.S. Senate race? And then the other is the person who's leaving it, Tom Tillis, who has been recently, ever since he said he was not going to continue within his role, very outspoken against the president. How much do those two individuals potentially play in what we see happen down the line in November in this U.S. Senate race?
Well, I think to take the president, all midterms generally become referendums on the president and the president's party. And right now, Republicans control both the U.S. House and the U.S. Senate. So it's a trifecta of unified government. But generally, what we know is the president is going to bear the responsibility for the situation that the country is facing in the midterm election. And with these disapproval ratings, not just nationally, but here in North Carolina, I think it's shaping up to be a kind of classic, the president's party is going to suffer at the polls come November. How big of an impact that's going to be, we'll have to wait and see how things move through the summer. A lot of voters' minds get made up by the end of summer. So we're talking about, a pretty good chunk of the electorate will have their decisions made by the time we get to the general campaign starting in the fall. I think for Tom Tillis, his lame duck status has kind of opened up the opportunity for him to be critical and to hold the president and, more importantly, his administration to task. It's notable that Senator Tillis has gone after key surrogates, but not necessarily the president in all of this. Now, he has stated publicly he's not going to run for any future political office, but we'll have to watch and see how his approach to dealing with these issues, kind of influences. I would say that the president is probably going to be the more powerful factor in all of the voters' decision making rather than Senator Tillis. But Senator Tillis can kind of shape the dynamic of how Republicans are going to be reacting come the general campaign.
And I was looking over your survey and the results and saying that Tillis at this point, approval rating slightly underwater, 39% disapprove to 34% approving. And depending on the party, it goes the way you would imagine. Over one third of Republicans disapprove, while almost one third of Democrats approve of Tillis. Dr. Bitzer, is there anything else when it comes to either the race or even when it comes to how North Carolinians are viewing the president that you think we need to know? I know we got a few moments here. I just want to give you the floor.
Yeah, I think one other question that we asked 4 questions about the military operations in Iraq. And one of the questions that we asked was, do you support the deployment of U.S. troops on the ground in Iran? And certainly the military bases in Virginia, along with North Carolina, we're seeing an increased deployment of troops into that region. North Carolinians, at least, are heavily against putting boots on the ground. 58% of North Carolinians said that they disagree with supporting deployment of U.S. troops into military action on the ground in Iran. Only 18% agreed with that decision to deploy troops for ground operations. And it is heavily among Democrats, 73% are opposed. Among independents, 63% of them are opposed. Republicans are fairly evenly divided. 39% are opposed, but a third of Republicans would support it. If we end up with troops in operations on the ground in Iran, what I will be looking for in future surveys is, do Republicans rally behind the president and move into agreement, or are they very much against the president in terms of deployment? I think that's a critical component to all of this to watch into the future.
As always, Dr. Bitzer, we're so thankful for you to come in and talking with us. Dr. Michael Bitzer, professor of politics and history at Catawba College and director for North Carolina politics and public service. Of course, we are going to be closely watching what happens with that Senate race and see how things happen within this midterm election. Thank you so much, as always.
My pleasure.